This is the big picture. This is my idea so far for the Knight Mozilla Learning Lab, and it's an editorial crowdsourced democracy for news issues. It's to put the relevancy, sociability, user-generated content, readability, and finishability into news. Its unique point is that it's the studio discussion for online news. So what's wrong with online news? Well, this post by Phil Gifford, with which he created today's Guardian, talks about friction, all the decision that you have to make when you look at a website with which to get to your story. Readability, all the things that get in the way of you reading a story, ads, navigation, everything that pops up and things going to different pages. And a very important thing is finishability. How do you know when you've finished with a news site? With a newspaper, you can finish it and you have that idea in your head that you know what has happened. Whereas with online news, you're in this churn of 24 hours where you never feel like you actually know what you should know. There's always something more out there. This is a blog post by Andy Rutledge called News Redux. And in it, he speaks of the experience of online news, that there's too much noise and too much filtering you have to do. That's not an enjoyable or relaxing or enlightening experience like the traditional newspaper. And a very good point he makes is that with the multitude of apps, it means you're not getting it right in the beginning. If news is conveyed properly and naturally, it should not matter which device with which you're getting your news from. It should work on all of them. And this is a blog post by Brad Colbo, which is called Why the Newspaper is Dying. And I really like the layout. It's very, very succinct. With it, he talks about, I think his important points is links and ownership, never linking to sites referenced in the stories, and in particular content as well, that they have to adhere to a template which they end up throwing so much in. So you have 300 share buttons, your content takes up less than 20% of the page, you've got random crammed things into the template and auto-playing videos. It's just too much. And then this blog by Anil Dash is about commenting and fostering a community on your website. He says that you are responsible for all the horrible things that are on your website. It is your fault. You need to police it, and there has to be a human aspect of it as well. And if you don't have that, then you shouldn't actually allow commenting on your website. It's your responsibility. But also there's soft power, changing the behavior of people on your website in order to foster a much better community. And then there's this article by Jeff Jarvis in relation to The Guardian going digital first. I really, really like the line that he writes here saying, the article is no longer the atomic unit of news. So all these things of readability, finishability, making it a good experience, having this ownership and content in it, having this conversation, why are we trying to put it into the article? It's not the right place. And for me, what speaks to me that online news should be about is about content, and we should get user-generated content in there. And what should be the place where all this is the conversation, because that's where the ultimate understanding is. And so with that, online news is also great. I get most of my news online. You can get things like this that are graphics which are interactive, which you can't get anywhere else, which you can sit there and explore. But you can also get this kind of traditional discussion and insight and really well thought out and written articles about an issue, not necessarily the happenings. And then you get this great curation of user-generated content now being put up with things like Storify, which is a great source for news for me. And then you get things like Al Jazeera have in-depth features which they put on as a proper news article. And then, well, the main thing is also you get blogs, you get things by users who have generated it, who have a background that is not necessarily about them being a journalist. This is about a guy who actually is Norwegian, and he was saying how when he was at this youth camp, he actually thought himself, if you wanted to completely destroy a party, you just kill everyone at the youth camp. And so at the end of this article, which was absolutely brilliant, he says that how on earth can a person actually use bombing a government building as a sideline, as a way of distracting people for his main target, which was actually completely destroying a party, not just killing all these young youths. It was the most insightful article that I read. So with that, I think that news needs relevancy. That was what was most relevant to me, and that what got the conversation going and my brain thinking and made it much more striking and personable. It needs sociability. It really came to light when I could discuss it with my friends. It has to put in the user-generated content in with the news, and it has to give it its rightful place. It has to have readability and finishability. And so with that, I want to make something that combines things like Storify, getting all the user-generated content together. Also, Big Blue Button, which is this online webinar where service where you can actually have content going, you can see people, you can hear people, and then you have people in the chat room and the discussion room. So people have different levels, but they can all get together for one particular issue. Things like a reader, in that way having everything just sitting there and just stacked. That should be, your content management system. It should be about the content, not about the template. And what I ultimately want to see, which is what I enjoy most coming from a broadcast background, is the studio discussion. That for me is where you get your finishability and also your readability. It's easier to understand a person who's talking than to go through an article that assumes previous knowledge or a certain place in it. And at the end of the day, what it should generate for people who aren't at the studio discussion is the experience of almost like a traditional newspaper. So that for me is the big picture where you can put an article in, you can put a storify in, you can put a comment piece in, you can put an infographic, you can put another blog from a different user from a different background in with it. You can put in a video, you can put in an in-depth feature article, all in the same place, but the conversation is the navigation. So what you have is that in this place here, which is the studio discussion filmed of who is speaking, they have to justify the content. And so you get the justification with the content. And that's how you navigate through this actual page. It's just going to be one big picture front page. And the only other thing that you get is the submitted by, so that you can go and talk to the person, not necessarily who made it, but who justified it. And that way it will promote people putting their own content or content that they found which really speaks to them into this website where the layout is the relevancy. And this is how they submit it. They submit it into the big bucket where they have to put a justification, and then there's meta moderation for the moderators. You have to be human as well, but then there's algorithmic support of voting up and down and looking at what type it is. And then when it gets approved, the content goes into the big bucket, which people can see, so they can see what's actually being chosen and going in, what's going to come up for the discussion, so they can actually go and check it out themselves previously beforehand if they want to. But also then you can see the contributors and the background for them, where you can contact them, a piece about them that is submitted. And so you comment with content now, because you can have a blog, a Twitter account. Your opinion should come with a URL and they should sit in your space, not with the article. A bit like Facebook comments. They should sit in your personal space. And in that way you don't get so much spam or hateful things. And then this is the big discussion. This is going to be the live show where it's going to be about the content. It's going to be about the invited speakers who bring content, who justify it, but also the people who have put in content as well. They can be called up video and audio and take the place of the presenter. And the presenter controls when the content's coming on, how long it has, and then anyone, even if they don't have a justification or haven't submitted anything to the big bucket, they can still go and watch this show and vote yes or no when it comes to their relevancy. And this is sort of going to be a gauge. If people have yet to vote or decide on it, it means they're interested in it. It means there's something new, and it means they want to know more. If people are already voting for it, then you cut the time and you go to the next big bucket item. And also, the presenter is going to be the big cheese. It's not just going to be a simple moderation. This could be a guest presenter. But again, a bit like a studio discussion, they're going to have control, or at least helpers, with which to actually produce this show. So they will have a timer. There'll be a list of questions which anyone actually in the show can submit. They can only submit one question at a time though. And so you're going to have a community manager or meta moderator moving it up and down or deleting it if it's not relevant. Whenever new content put in, this is wiped, and then people can only put in one question for their content, a bit like a studio discussion where people put up their hands. And that's going to be the job of the presenter, to take the hard questions and to cut people off and give them their time in the spotlight. And so this is what I was thinking, that the technicalities behind it. There's going to have to be algorithmic support for the moderator. So with submission into the big bucket, you weigh how many times a specific URL has been put in. And so that's given popularity and weighted accordingly. Things that the community managers verify as spam, not only should they be weighted down, but the submitters should be weighted down as well. And then just steal the social metadata that comes with each article, the Facebook likes, the Google plus ones, the tweets. And I think anything that's not in English should be weighted higher, as long as the person justifying it can speak English and in the discussion justify and translate to people what's actually on it. The technicalities will be the video link to the submitted content. So when the big picture plays and people are talking in the corner, it has to link to the content. But again, that will be done with timing, a bit like the way subtitles come up. And then, but the recording, the main thing is during the show, you're going to see lots of faces. And then the moderator's video is going to change depending on who they call in from the outside, who they take the questions from. So what needs to be recorded is a Google Hangouts-esque video speaker recorder where the loudest person actually gets into the main picture. And then the big picture generation needs to be automated, so it's just after the discussion, the big picture is generated from that. That may produce bugs, that may be a bit difficult to do. It's going to have to be a creation setup, which I have to think about, and whether opening that up to the public for themselves. Expert invite and control. Just like any sort of big studio show, you're going to have to think about, right, my guests have to be set up, we have to mic them up, we have to make sure they're in the right shot. So this isn't going to be something that is necessarily simple and easy, but hopefully it's going to be worthwhile in the end. And then Google Translate for content. So my main issue is that I'm building 3 apps and they're quite big, but they're going to be built on existing web infrastructure. So they're going to be built on things that are already there. Because, that's what I know, what sort of things are out there, and I can try and mash them up together. But again, I don't have the technicalities to actually say specifically what needs to be done. So if you do, or if you have any comment on the big picture, please do put a comment in my blog post. Thank you.